So good evening to you all. Thank you very much for joining with us again for yet another webinar on DMIE webinar series. Today we have the privilege of Mr. Suneth Kotuthenne. He's one of our elite alumni who used to graduate in early 20th century from the department in 2003, I suppose. So he's basically a manufacturing expert, manufacturing and supply chain expert, having 17 years of industry experience. So basically, he graduated from our department as a production engineer with first class honors from University of Peradeniya and gained experience in leading manufacturing organizations, mainly in two multinational companies, Unilever and Fonterra. So in his experience at Unilever, he has worked across functions in marketing, planning, projects, and manufacturing, and lead operations at Unilever's instant tea factory and detergent factory as well. So at Fonterra, he gained experience in dairy development and led manufacturing operations at the factory at Biyagama, as well as took over some responsibilities in innovating rollout at Fonterra plants in Bangladesh. So he's currently employed at Analytical Instruments Private Limited as a Vice President Supply Chain, a company that is the market lead in Sri Lanka for laboratory equipment for health and research sectors. He also works as a freelance consultant on manufacturing for Watawala Dairies Private Limited, and he's qualified with MBA from University of Colombo and associate member of Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. Mr. Suneth is a guest lecturer in operations management subject for many graduate and postgraduate programs in several institutes, and he used to be one of our industry advisory board member of the department as well. So Mr. Suneth always willing to support whenever we request his help. So he's very supportive towards departmental activities, especially on grooming, especially to motivate young graduates to basically perform well in the industries immediately after joining the industry. So therefore, in order for our final years to get a good advice just before they are leaving, so they are supposed to leave the university from August. So therefore, we invited Mr. Suneth to give an overview on what are the challenges currently available in the industry when you are joining as engineers. So I think Suneth is one of the best to speak about it because he's a very competent person, and now he's going to be in the next promotion, I would say, in another multinational company from August as a directorial position. So I hope that you will have many things to get from Mr. Suneth. So I hope you will actively participate in this session. So with that brief note, I would like to invite Mr. Suneth Kotuthenne to start his speech. Suneth, it's over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I think it's always a privilege to be able to talk to students, fresh graduates coming out, undergrads, because I think, you know, our ability to sort of groom you guys itself two ways. One in terms of you know, for me personally, it's a motivation to be able to contribute, and second, from an industry perspective, when we work in the industry, one of the challenges we have is you know, getting fresh graduates you know, into the industry and ensuring that they are ready, and we do have a few challenges in that, you know, and in terms of, so we can contribute to build that capability early on, then I think it's a win-win situation for everyone. I have a presentation with a couple of slides. I will try to move in between the presentation and a discussion because I would like to, I mean, technically I would have preferred to have a conversation like this on a more face-to-face basis, but unfortunately, given the, you know, current scenario, that's not possible. So let's use technology wherever possible. If any one of you wants to, you know, switch on your cameras, talk to me, ask questions, please do that. It will be much more helpful connecting to you with the camera on, but I do understand there will be some challenges in terms of networks and all of that. So that's understood, not a problem. But wherever possible, if you want to interact, please do switch on your camera and ask questions. I don't want to do this as a presentation. I think some of you would have already experienced, a few of the interactions I've had with you guys since your final years. I'm sure over the last 4 years, I would have met me at least once or twice at some of the sessions at the faculty as well. So my way of doing this stuff. I have very basic outliners in my presentations. I don't put a lot of stuff on it, and I would like to conduct the session more through a form of a discussion. So we have about almost 40 participants here, and I'm sure all of you would have unique challenges. I mean, some might be common, but I'm sure all of you would be thinking that you all have a unique challenge. So let me just start off. How do I share screen? Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. So what I thought of talking to you today is, I think it's a little bit a special discussion, because this is a very standard discussion where I would talk to anybody in a final year, but there is a very special situation right now. I think we are all aware of it, where you're going into a market which is in a pretty how do I call it, stressful situation. From an industry perspective, many industries are impacted. So I think it's important that we understand what that market situation is. Is it all doom and gloom? Is there no hope for anybody? Are you guys the most badly impacted? So sometimes you might be thinking that this is your after 4 years of studying engineering in the faculty, you're now trying to step out into the market, and market's in a very bad shape. So are you the guys who are going to be badly impacted, or are you the guys who are going to be least impacted, right? So that's a discussion you're going to have, more from ensuring that you all have your mindset fixed, and a little bit of optimism to come in. That's the plan. Um, so if you look at, I mean, there's nothing to hide about this. There's nothing to sugarcoat on this. It's the market from a jobs perspective, from a careers perspective, is in a very, very serious situation, right? I mean, I'll start off with that. It may sound negative to start off with, but that's the reality, right? I think we all know that not only as a Sri Lankan economy, but as a global economy, um, it's almost all economies are down. Even the big countries are struggling right now, due to various different reasons. But what happens is there's an overall loss in demand. Um, Two reasons. One is that people have restricted income, therefore their demand comes down. People can't spend on things that they used to spend earlier on. As well as, especially in countries which has a very serious health situation due to lockdown, curfews, etc. People, even who can spend money, are restricted from spending money, and therefore the economy is not in a good position in most markets. So this impacts both the local market in terms of Sri Lanka as well as our export sector. So if you look at some of the, we have some big industries like the apparel industry in exports, and I wouldn't say that they are almost completely down, but it's not the same that it was. They are definitely impacted by it. I think they've recovered to a certain extent in certain markets, but overall, if you look at it, it is down. Same for some of the other exports that we have, where the overall consumption in those global markets have come down drastically. So this is a reality that we need to understand and see what we do. In the local market, again, we see that lockdowns are continuing week after week. People have limited income. Most of people are, their income is impacted, so that impacts the whole buying power of the consumers, and the markets come down. The second point is in terms of companies themselves. Obviously, when there is uncertainty in the market, nobody's going to invest. So even where companies had plans of investment and putting in new lines, new factories, I'm sure most of those plans would have sort of got folded up and kept aside until there is some kind of a what do you call positive news on the market when it comes to the growth, right? So nobody's going to invest millions of rupees in terms of new investment right now in the traditional formats of industry. Third is there are companies that are still maintaining some kind of market based on the industry, right? For example, I currently work in a company that's catering to the health sector. So we do laboratory equipment for hospitals and the consumables that goes for this equipment. So we have about 80% market share, mainly with government hospitals and with the private sector as well. And as well as we do for universities, research institutes, agriculture, engineering, sort of a dealership kind of a industry. And to be honest, it's not as impacted as some of the other industries, because the health industry is something that's that's there, that's not going to go away. But again in this industry, just to give you a perspective, we cater to the the traditional tests that you do, right? So for example, if you want to get your cholesterol or your blood glucose or whatever tested, you go to a either a laboratory or a hospital and get your stuff tested, blood or urine or stools or whatever, the testing that you do. And what we find is that with this kind of a lockdown and the pressures that are there, uh, the demand for this also keeps coming down, because people now go to the hospital only if they really have to go to the hospital. So the usual clinics, etc., are no longer there. So even for the health sector, there is an impact. But on the other hand, we do have a market in terms of PCR machines, etc. But having said all of that, so for us, the market isn't down, but we have a problem with our supply chain. Because we import all these equipment and reagents from China, from Europe. And unfortunately, what happens is, with the global challenges in the markets, we have a significant impact in the supply chain. One is in terms of delivery, other one is in terms of costs. Cost of shipping has gone up almost twofold, threefold in the last couple of months from certain sectors, especially out of China, because there's a big demand for products. And when people start working from home, when they are sort of based in home, they will start buying a lot of stuff to equip their home. This was in an recent article that I read, that especially in the US and in Europe, people are buying a lot of stuff out of eBay and AliExpress, to make their homes converted into offices, etc. So there's a lot of traffic, shipping traffic, that's directed from China to these markets. So countries like Sri Lanka can actually be impacted. Because we do have situations where ships sort of bypass Colombo port even if we have a consignment. So that's the nature of the industry. So there is significant interruption to material. So that's more from a market perspective. Second is in terms of employees. I'm sure you'll understand that it's difficult to get employees to work. There are restrictions. There's no public transport. There's risk of people traveling. And it's like in the industries that we are in, because we go to hospitals, our delivery staff, our sales staff goes to hospitals all around the country. So there is a risk in terms of their health and safety, which we need to manage. Then I'm sure some of the factories that are running, some of the food factories I know are running, still running, because they need to supply the market. So getting the employees to work is a challenge. So even if the operations are running, it's not running in full capacity, purely because there are challenges in getting employees because of transport restrictions and risk, quarantines, and stuff like that. Because if you get one of your employees identified as positive, then you need to quarantine that entire shift. So that's an operational challenge that people are faced with. And the third one is maybe not applicable to you, but one of the things that we found is that, so for example, we have a couple of vacancies in the organization, but when we're looking for experienced people are not really willing to make a move right now, right? I've decided to move out because of the opportunity on the other side being good. That's a bit of a different story. But what we've seen is that people are reluctant to leave a permanent confirmed job for another opportunity. Whereas earlier on they would have given it a little bit more of risk. They'll probably take a bit more risk and sort of join a company if the perks are better, etc. But right now, given the risk in the market, we find that a lot of people are reluctant, even if we offer a good incentive, a good package for these vacancies. People are reluctant to move, right? Because you don't want to start in a new place as a probationary employee, and then we don't know what the market is, you don't know how it will turn out. So all of this is a bit it's a bit of the negatives of it, right? I mean there's no argument that it's in a bad place. um, but let's look at, okay, is there anything? I mean, there's nothing called good news in a situation like this. It's always bad news. But can we look at this in a little bit more of a positive way, right? So the first point is that, I mean, history has shown us that I mean, economies do turn around, right? I mean, maybe in our lifetime we are experiencing this as a as a first time situation, but I'm sure from a world history perspective, the world has gone through these cycles on and off. And even as a country, I think our generation also would have gone through certain crisis in a country in terms of stability, in terms of terrorism, etc., which I think most of you guys may not have fully experienced, fortunately for you. So I think it's always a idea that it's not always doom and gloom. It's just that it's a question of how long are we going to hold on to this situation, right? So it's economies will turn around. I mean, that's a proven fact. And we see positive news around in many countries, while the negatives are also there. The second point is that it's also opened up some new opportunities in industries, new ways of thinking. People have been forced to think differently. Very traditional norms have been challenged. People who were sort of reluctant to adapt to some of the technology and some of the skills have been sort of challenged to do so, because of technology that you need for it, logistics, delivery. I mean, things that you would usually go and buy from a shop, or something today, e-commerce, online, social media. It's all over the place, right? I mean, you can just get anything delivered to your house. So I think that gives you an opportunity which is very different from the opportunity that was there earlier on. So even consumer goods, uh, tech stuff. um I mean, for me, if I had to sort of, maybe last year or the year before, if I had to buy this headset, I would probably have to probably go to Unity Plaza or somewhere in Colombo to look at something and buy it. But today, I mean, I actually bought this off the internet, of a social media page of some some site who does all sort of fancy stuff, and it's delivered to your home, cash on delivery, and you just take it. So these are some of the it's just one example of some of the new opportunities in the industries, in the way you market your products, and in the way that we can grow. um, Again, in terms of how companies have adapted to this, last year when the pandemic sort of hit us for the first time, I'm sure most of you would remember, it was total chaos. Nobody was ready for it. If you take an example, if you take the supermarket chains, the retail, I don't think anyone was ready for that. There was total chaos. The online ordering didn't work. I mean, people were frustrated. Orders were being placed. Credit cards were charged, but goods were not coming. But I think this time around, a year later, I think most of the companies have bounced back with technology, in terms of solutions, in where you can actually manage your supply chain a little bit better. The third point is in terms of the fact that when you go through an experience like this, it makes you a little bit more resilient. It gives you some experience to face the future. So yes, it is a bad experience, yes, but we all know that whenever we go through a bad experience, there's always a learning opportunity for us, right? So versus somebody who's not gone through a bad experience versus somebody who has gone through a bad experience. I mean, not everybody who has a bad experience learns from it. That's what we are here to discuss. But if you have had the opportunity to learn from a bad experience, then that becomes a competitive advantage, right? So you know that that's a new knowledge that you have in terms of adapting to a much more difficult situation into the future, and that can be considered as a competitive advantage for you if you are ready to adapt to that. So likewise, more things to think of in terms of, there'll be some light at the end, be time factors, there's going to be the politics of it, there's going to be all the concerns that are there, but we are very sure that we will come out of it. It will not be easy, but we will come out of it, right? So that's a brief overview of where we are. I don't think it's anything new, but I'm talking these points more from a employment perspective. So some of the things that has happened in the job market over the last year is that, as you know, some of the industries are completely shut. So if you think that you're in a bad position, think of things like airlines, tourism, restaurants, which has no future whatsoever. At least manufacturing industries still work, right? Even at 50% capacity, they work, and most of the plants work. Essential foods exports, they are working. I'm moving into a company that's into safety equipment and stuff, so the market is actually good for them, gloves and stuff like that. So I would say engineering is probably, as an industry, least impacted versus some of the, especially the service sector, right? So I think keep that as a positive note for you to understand that these goods will always be needed. People will probably start cutting down on services first, but your physical goods, food, essential goods will always be needed. So those industries will still be there. Then the second point is that I think you guys are still lucky because you have not yet invested anything other than your education right now. So you can actually plan for this when you step out in a month or two. Whereas I personally know a lot of individuals who batchmates of mine, people who have actually put in a lot of investment effort into industries, into building a businesses which have been badly impacted due to the pandemic, and they're in very bad shape right now. So I think it's for you all is to think that it is still you're not hit at all I'm not sure what your personal challenges are, but as a batch of fresh graduates, I'm here to tell you that if you think you're in a bad wicket, I think you all need to think again. I think you're in a perfectly good wicket because you know what to expect when you're graduating versus people before you who have made decisions, invested their time, money, effort into certain industries, doing certain things which has sort of had a bad impact. So that's my start of the discussion, to say that yes, it's a risky market out there, but you're here to get a good start and go, right? So I'd like to sort of just open up a couple of, we can have a final round of questions at the end, but I would like to, at this point in time, before I go to the other part of my discussion, any specific questions you have about the current market or the industry, any specific question you have, you can ask now. Before I go, we'll take about a minute or two. If there's anything specific you want to know, anything that's making you nervous about the market out there. I may not know everything about all the industries, but I'll try to give my view where I can. Any questions? I hope I have not lost you on the connection. You're still there, right?
Um, Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, tell me.
Yeah. So I have one question regarding industries that were affected badly by COVID-19.
Yep.
So as you said, most industries would bounce back. So if we are to invest in an industry, what kind of industry do you think we should really be in the watch for, look out for?
I'll be a bit careful, Rajiv, in answering that, because it's a a risk versus return game, right? Because there are two ways you can approach it. There are certain industries that are not so impacted, right, and they will sort of be normal. They'll probably operate normal and then get back into normalcy. There are industries that are badly impacted, and therefore right now it doesn't really make sense for you all to get into some of those things. Let's say, for example, let's take apparel for an example, right? But on the other hand, it's a bit of a gamble also, because if these industries do bounce back, right, some of these industries have been big players. They have been big markets. So in terms of there's always an opportunity to get back into a much larger scale as possible. My advice is that when you are coming out of the university as a fresh graduate, I give this advice to everybody. This is my personal view. Don't worry too much about what you are getting into, at least for the first year or two. As long as you sort of it's not a investment cast in cement and concrete that you are going to build your career on your first job, right? So I think the first thing you need to do is to get your hands onto a job or an industry that you think you are comfortable with working, and then that will give you about a year or two to sort of figure out where the market is heading. And more importantly, it is about your ability to fit to that industry, right? So for example, I can spell out a couple of industries, but not all of you will be able to work in those industries and in those roles, right? So my advice, Rajiv, right? So my advice, Rajiv, is that at this point in time, as fresh graduates passing out, if you find an organization that can give you a decent experience, I mean, something that's not too bad of, I would suggest that you consider it to get your feet into the industry and then plan from there. Because I see a lot of stress in graduates trying to figure out what their first job should be. And I believe my first job lasted only for 8 months. Because I thought that was my my passion. I joined an ERP solutions company. I don't even put it up on my CV because it's now just that 8 months has nothing to do with the rest of my 17 years. And then in 8 months I realized that's not really what I want, and then I got an opportunity at a multinational. So don't worry too much about your first step at this point in time. That's a question more critical for somebody who's been in the been in the industry for a couple of years. Am I clear, Rajiv? I hope you. I may not have answered your question specifically, but I'm saying don't worry about which industry right now. Get your hands on to something, because it's going to be very competitive given the situation. Try to get your hands on to something that you're comfortable with, and you should be okay for a year or two.
Yes, sir. Thank you. You did answer my question.
Any other questions?
Sir, I'm
Any other
Pranit.
questions?
Can you hear
Right.
me?
Yes, Pranit.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have questions. As industry people, have you forecasted what will happen after the pandemic? Will it be the same as before the pandemic? I mean, like demands, what industries are in more highest place, like that.
There are some models that are used by people, economists globally, as well as some local predictions, Pranit, in terms of services. It normally shows that consumer goods, etc., would bounce back to a certain normalcy in about a year or two. I think some of the some of the what you call basic commodities probably will be the least impacted, because people definitely need those things. And again, certain services will bounce back. But the only thing is, what is forecasted is that the models that companies work might change, right? So for example, companies may now look at less investment heavy options, trying to go into more of partnering with other companies, etc., in terms of supply chain. So that's one. But overall, it would be very difficult to predict markets. I can probably share some of the surveys or research articles I've read on this with the group if I can later on. But I think the most stabilized one would probably be the consumer goods in terms of the basic essential products. The rest of the products, etc., might, especially automobile industry, fashion, etc., might take a bit more time based on the forecasts, because these then become not so essential in terms of markets. So I mean, there are many industries around the world, so it's difficult to sort of rank that. But I would say industries that are more towards day-to-day services, goods and services, probably have a much better chance of bouncing back.
Okay, sir. Thank you
All
for
right.
the answer.
Okay.
Thank
Pradit, I hope. Right. Okay. Thank you. Right. We'll go to the next part of the discussion, which is more of how you guys can sort of face the industry, and how you all can sort of compete in the industry, right? So I call this building your brand, because it's important that you start doing that now. I'm sure if you had listened to something that I had told you, I'm sure I met you somewhere in the last 4 years. It's still not too late. You got 2 months ahead of you. So in addition to your studies and all of that you're doing, give this some thought. We will discuss some points in terms of what this is, because I mean, not everybody, I mean, for example, we never knew about this when we sort of came out of university, but we eventually learn it. So it's so once you learn something, it's always good to go and tell it to somebody else so that they can be ready for it, and not have it learn it the difficult way that you did. Can anybody volunteer and tell me what's a brand? What are some of the global brands? Anything? It could be a consumer, it could be service. Any brands that pop to your mind? Just give me some. Anything. You know what a brand is, right? Any brands that come to your mind? Global, local, anything. I like to have this as a bit more interactive session from here on. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit difficult. So let's look at automobile brands, right? So you get Toyota, you get BMW, you get Mercedes-Benz, you get IT companies like Microsoft, Apple, right? Samsung. Okay, then you get the retail brands, you get apparel brands. What else? So those are mostly consumer goods. Then you get service brands like, right, get telecommunication services, you get medical services, right? What else? What about education, right? So University of Peradeniya is a brand, right? Which has some features to it, which has some some qualities to it, right? So can you all think of brands other than what I spoke was the general stuff that we talk about. Anybody can think of brands in a slightly different way and tell me what a brand is. I just want to know what your understanding is. What's a brand? Come on, guys! You need to participate in this conversation, otherwise it's going to be very difficult for me to talk looking at my own face and the screen here.
I think it is some.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Suneth.
So I think it is something which can be distinguished from the other products which are in the same industry.
Okay,
So
give me an. So your Senuri Guru Sin, right?
yeah,
Yes, Senuri. Go in. Give me an example.
So if we take a product example like sunlight,
Right.
so it has been very popular and loved by other people. So it is something which can be distinguished from all the other products which is
Distinguish in
used.
terms of what? What do you distinguish it with?
I think based on maybe the quality and how they have marketed themselves as a
Okay.
brand.
Okay.
And overall, and apart from that, I think even humans also can be considered as brands as well.
Very good. Any other thoughts? I'll give you a challenge. Can anybody tell me what the world's oldest brands are that are still surviving? This can be a bit controversial, but I usually ask this question to check whether your thinking is right.
Coca-Cola.
Much older. I'm talking about hundreds, if not thousands of years. Any guesses?
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola, fine, but that's the last 100, 150 years. I'm talking something hundreds of years old. Still strong brands. Any guesses?
Famous scientists like Isaac Newton.
Okay, but that's an individual. There's nothing that we can do about them, right? I'm talking about brands that people subscribe to, right?
Say Rolex.
Okay, again, old, but I want you to think outside the box. I'm not talking about consumer goods here or any kind of goods. What about religion? Have you ever thought religion as a brand, right? Just think about it, right? I mean, not in a controversial way, but think about it, right? I mean, for me, that's something that I've learned, that that's probably that's for some of the worlds, whether it is Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, anything, right? I mean, those are thousands of years old, right? And people still, you buy into that brand, right? I mean, in one way or the other, it's something that you believe in, right? That you think it's right, you think it's good, just like you believe in the qualities of a product, you believe in it, and to and you have millions and millions of people around the world who don't even know the start of these things, but you get into it. So just think of a brand like, I think that lady said, in terms of people are brands, right? So you can create something that people will recognize the moment they see a part of it, right? So if you take for example, if you take Coca-Cola, somebody mentioned Coca-Cola. If you see the sometimes you can see a Coca-Cola ad on television where it doesn't say Coca-Cola anywhere else on that, and you still know it's a Coca-Cola ad, right? You can have a sunlight ad. They don't even want to show a piece of soap. If the moment you hear that tune, it's a sunlight ad, right? Likewise, there are certain ads that have had certain brand features for over a long period of time, that the moment you look at it, what it is, right? So look at it that way, right? So I'm saying is, think about brands beyond consumer goods. Think of it in terms of what you can build in terms of an image, right? So I think fairly good understanding there. So what makes these brands powerful, right? So somebody spoke about Rolex, somebody said Coca-Cola, Sunlight. There are big brands, Toyota, Volvo, the apparel brands. Let's stick to the consumer goods that we know. I think primarily there are two things that's there, right? The first is that the brand has to mean something, right? And it has to mean something in line with what the customer wants. And just give me a second, sorry. Right. So in terms of what the what the brand promises, right? So you have to be in line with what you promise, and then the second point is much more important in terms of you have to be delivering on this promise every time, right? So if the brand starts to waver, it starts to change its functionality, it starts to change what it stands for, then it becomes a problem, right? It doesn't mean that everybody has to give high class quality, etc. No, I mean, even a brand that can be economical is still a brand, right? I mean, it's still a powerful brand, and people will want it because it's economical. It may not have the same features as a a much more expensive brand, but it delivers. It's an economical brand and it delivers on economic. So that's what makes it powerful. That over a period of time, you need to have that ability to deliver on what you promise you say you will deliver, and every time you don't fault on that. So what if you're new, right? So we said brands are going to be built over a period of time, but what if you're new to the market, right? There are a couple of things you can do. I will relate this to your personal sort of journey, right? The first thing is you need to have a plan, right? So you're new, you don't know anything about what to do, so you need to have a plan, right? At least, okay, we'll start on something, try this and see how it goes. You have to do your research and development in advance, right? So you need to, okay, you're new, you don't know what about the market. So for example, this session we are having today is part of your research and development, right? So you are getting a bit of a view about what the market is, what the session is. Know the market and your competition, right? So if you're new getting into the market, you need to know. So like some of the questions that were asked, you need to know what the industries are, what are the type of opportunities that are there, your competition, right? I mean, there's 40-50 of you from this batch, but I'm sure you'll have colleagues from the other departments, you'll have other faculties, you'll have other graduates, you'll have non-graduates, you'll have thousands of people looking at getting a job, right? So you have a competition there. So you need to understand what are their capabilities, what are their skills, versus what you can do, right? And then the last point is that you need to know your strengths and weaknesses. I mean, most people don't like this word weakness, but I put it there because you are good at certain things, you are not good at certain things right now, right? So that doesn't mean that you will not be good at these things for the rest of your life, right? So you're good at certain things, you're not good at certain things right now, right? So you need to understand that, so that when a market opportunity comes, you need to figure out, okay, is this something that you're good at? Is this something that you can develop your weaknesses, right? And because please understand that you're not going to be the same person in another 10 years, right? So this is another mistake that most people do. And I just think, I'm sure you would be in your early 20s right now. Think of maybe 10 years ago, early teens, the type of person you were, the maturity you were, the talent and the skill that you had versus what you are doing right now, right? Maybe in another 10-15 years you would have a completely different perspective about life. Your strengths would be very different. I mean, I was a very introverted person when I was in school, didn't like to talk much in public, etc. Today I've sort of gone to the other extreme. I love having these conversations, right? So it changes, right? So you have to understand that what's a weakness now is never going to be a weakness for the rest of your life, but unless you do something about it, right? So if you are new, you need to have this, you need to have a plan. We will discuss this in a little bit of a discussion. Do your research, know your market, and know your strengths and weaknesses, right? Here's a bit of a question for you. This is a bit of a debate that's there. Consistency versus adapting to change. Right now, if you take a brand, right now I'll relay this back to the brand. I said there's a level of what I mean by consistency is that you don't change something, right? Like I said, that Sunlight jingle or the Coca-Cola logo or whatever. I mean, they would have changed a little bit, but it's consistent, right? So it's not changed. Whereas there's also an argument saying that if you don't change, then you don't survive, right? So how do you sort of balance this is a question that you all need to answer, right? Because when you get into the market, there will be certain levels of consistency in terms of your brand image, your personality that you will have to maintain. Otherwise, you can't suddenly change your personality and your style year on year. But on the other hand, you need to also be open to change. So these are not going to be mutually exclusive. I hope you know what mutually exclusive is, right? So one is not independent from the other. Have a level of consistency in terms of your delivery, your effort, your energy. So when you start a job, you will have a lot of energy, you'll have a lot of hope, vision, all of that. And then over a little bit of time, ensure that you don't lose that. So that's the consistency part. Adapting to change is change in your attitudes and your view about the world, because as I said, if you don't, then you have not grown, right? You would have grown in your years. You're 22 now, you'll probably be 30, but if you still think like a 22-year-old, or you still think like a 12-year-old, then you're not adapted to that change, right? In terms of what's important, in terms of values. Dr. Azal, if you don't mind, I'll need to take a 5-minute break or even a 3-minute break.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Little bit
No
of a thing I need to attend to. If you can just excuse me for 5 minutes, guys. Just think of anything you want to ask me or anything during this break. I'll be back. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Just think about this. Just think about what I mean by consistency and adapting to change, because this is something that most of you get confused, right? Do I need to change something in myself, or do I need to be the same person? So let's look at, okay, so there are certain things that you need to be consistent, and the first thing is in terms of the good things, right? Look at your deliveries, your positives, your integrity, right? So those you need to be consistent, obviously. But if there's anything that's preventing you from going forward, preventing you from growing as an individual, something that you think is a weakness, then obviously that's something you need to change, right? So that's a balance you need to take. Otherwise, you will be like an undergraduate, even after 20 years in the industry, there are still people like that, where they have not really taken up the challenge of changing. And then there are people who don't have any consistency in terms of very unpredictable in terms of their personalities. That's also a bit of a challenge. So this is something for you all to think about. So let's I probably won't, I'll skip this because a bit of tight on time as well. But think about yourself. What are your features, right? So as an individual, what do you have to offer, right? So most of you have something common to offer in terms of your engineering degree. Yes, good. But like I think somebody said, for a brand, you need to be unique. So think of something, just write down, do this as an exercise, some bit of homework. What is it that, so if all 40 of you turn up for an interview and I have to select, right? How am I going to select that, right? So I'm assuming all of you got a basic, understanding of engineering. So what's that you can offer? And it may work for my organization, it may not work for somebody else's organization. Understand that, right? So Rolex is a good brand. I'm sure most of us won't be able to buy a Rolex, right? Because it's not catering to everybody, right? So understand that just because you have a certain feature or the company is looking for a certain feature, it's not a good or bad thing. It's about where you fit in, right? So Volvo is a good brand of a car. Somebody might say Suzuki is not a good brand of car, but people demand for Suzuki because it's affordable, and that's an important feature, right? So you need to think about what you can offer, right? So this is the the question you need to ask yourself, right? So you're an engineering graduate. What can you do, right? So can I get some answers from you guys, right? So if you come for an interview and I ask, okay, as an engineering graduate, what are your capabilities from an engineering perspective? What is it that you can do? Can I get at least 2 or 3 answers from you? Because if you can't answer this question, then you're in trouble. Anybody volunteering? Sorry, I need at least 2 or 3 volunteers for this. As an engineering graduate, what is it that you can do? What do you think you can do?
Problem solving can be one.
Give me an example of a problem solving, because problems are, you'll have various types of problems in life, in industry, right? Give me an example.
There is a problem in the manufacturing flow, like as a bottleneck in some process, then we can analyze that in a technical perspective and make sure that we can give it some sort of a efficient solution rather than going for a trial and error method.
Okay, so you can give a more structured approach to a production challenge.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, Chiran. Anything else? Any ideas? What can you do? Right, because you're not an experienced engineer, right? You're a fresh graduate engineer, right? You need to understand this very clearly. Otherwise, you will go with different expectations and find yourself in trouble. Right. So you have some basic knowledge, right? You have some basic understanding of some of the concepts, some of the processes, how to do it, certain things, right? But you may not have the experience, right? But I think okay, so I'll take that answer in terms of okay, so you know some tools, right? You're equipped with some tools that you have picked up over the last couple of years that you can apply to a real life situation, and you may not get the perfect answer because you can't get the perfect answers only with those tools, but you probably can help get closer to a proper answer, right? So that's what you do as an engineer, right? Because I mean the fields are very vast. You can be into design, you can be into manufacturing, you can be into supply chain, you can be in many things. But if I ask you a general concept, it's about okay, you have a problem, a bottleneck, some things that preventing you from doing things better. That's one. Then there's routine stuff that you will do, right? So don't have too much hopes up that every day you will be problem solving. No, you will have very routine stuff to do as well. I mean that's part of doing any job, right? You'll have very routine stuff that's probably boring, and that's something you do, but you have some technical knowledge about it as to why you do it. You understand why you do it, and if you don't understand why you do it, you have the knowledge, you have the capability to okay now learn about it, right? So that's the difference that I would say I would expect from an engineer, right? Because otherwise you can instruct anybody to go and do some lubrication or do some maintenance work on a machine, but if you don't understand why you are doing what you are doing, then the value addition from an engineer doesn't really come through, right? So you need to have an understanding of what that is. Then in terms of skills and competencies, right? So I think the part of the discussion is what is it that you all need to develop, and don't worry, this is not something that you develop overnight. This is something that you develop over a period of years. You still learn, right? So I'm still developing. So even I have development plans that I discuss with my bosses in terms of what my weaknesses are and what I need to develop. So skill and competencies, let's look at a couple of things that's probably applicable to a fresh graduate and see how you all fit into this, right? Before we go into that, let me tell you that when you look at skills and competencies, you need to look at it in 3 different levels, right? Otherwise you will compare yourself with the wrong benchmark and sort of feel confused. Entry level, right? So entry level is what we would look at from a fresh graduate. We don't look at you having very high skills of engineering, analytical skills and all of that, but we do look at certain skill levels for an entry level role, because once you come into the industry, that's where you will gain your experience. But if I'm interviewing a fresh graduate versus somebody with 3 to 4 years experience, of course my expectations would be very different, right? So at an entry level job, you have certain levels of skills that is just for you to step into the organization, right? Then you need certain survival skills, right? What I mean by survival skill is you need to keep your job. You need to not to do anything stupid. Just do, just focus, concentrate, and be moderate, right? Nothing great, just maintaining doing your job. You need some skills based on where you are. You need to learn from the job, right? As you do, those are what we call survival kind of skills in a job, right? You need to learn that. Then the third part is your competitive skills, right? So you can enter a organization at an entry level as a management trainee or a trainee engineer or a junior executive or whatever the titles are. That's not a problem. You enter with no experience, and then you can, some people survive for 20-25 years almost in the same role, and they are okay with it because that's their ambition. But some people are more ambitious, and they want to be competitive. So competitive means, okay, I got 2 junior engineers working in my plant, but I see that one person can actually do something at a higher responsibility. So then, we open paths for growth for those people. So it's important to, I don't want to go into details of each of these components, but you need to understand that as you are growing, you need to ensure that your skills and competencies grow with you. Otherwise, if you are at entry level for the next 10 years, then that's going to be a trouble, right? So as an entry level graduate or as an entry level into the industry, let's look at some of the things that we take as a given that you need to have. And I'm sure you have all of this, right? I'm very sure you have all the things that I'm going to talk about. Just think about it in a little bit more detail, because you may not have labeled them as such. They may be very normal stuff to you. And that's why when you go to an interview, you sometimes struggle to come up with the answers, come up with things, because you haven't thought about these things in that manner, right? So the first one is in terms of your engineering knowledge, right? Now, different companies based on different cultures, they will have different ways of testing this. But if you ask me, if somebody says that they're a graduate from a recognized university in Sri Lanka like Peradeniya or Moratuwa, for example, I mean, we have trust in that qualification, right? So that's that brand image of the university that you're talking about, right? So we are not going to worry too much that if you say you got a good grade from Peradeniya engineering faculty, I mean, or Moratuwa or Uno, whatever. I don't want to specify university, but I'm saying there's a general understanding that anybody coming out of these universities with a qualification knows their basics, because it's not easy to come out with their basic degree if you don't know that, right? So the qualification has some weight, right? I wouldn't say more or less, but it has some weight. But you can't rely on that alone, because there's 50 of you here with that same qualification. There's hundreds of you in the faculty, right? And then there are thousands out there who has the same piece of paper, right, with probably different letters on it, but it's more or less the qualifications the same, right? So you got different universities, different faculties, different departments, all probably sort of fighting onto a limited number of jobs. So that's the given. So please ensure that you all complete your academic studies. I know some of you will have a few challenges in terms of the academic program. Try to finish it off at your earliest in the best manner possible. I don't know what your current results are, GPAs are. So even if you've sort of fallen back in the past few years, if there's anything you can do to catch up, please try to catch it up, because it matters at some point in time. But if you haven't, then just park it. Let's look at what needs to be done less, because there's no point in trying to stress out on things you can't change. The next point is a very, very important point that I believe I would expect from engineers, at least the fresh engineering graduates. You need to understand all your basics. We don't expect you to know. I'm again, sorry to qualify, I'm talking about my expectations. So like I said, different people might have different views on this, but I would say that you need to have a very thorough understanding of your basics, of whatever you have learned, and the basics that are relevant to the job or the industry that you are applying to, right? So please do your research, like I said, in terms of where you're going. So if you're going into a factory environment, if you're going into a production facility, if you are going into a role that's to do with manufacturing or to do with maintenance or whatever, please understand the relevant lessons that you have learned with relation to that, and know your basics, right? When I mean by basics means you need to be able to, in very simple terms, explain some of the engineering concepts. We are not expecting you to remember formulas and stuff like that, because end of the day today, the tip of your fingers, you can get all of that stuff, but you need to know where to get this information from, either from the internet, or you need to have friends, networks, people. So you need to know that 20% of fundamentals that you will use every day, and the balance 80% you need to know where to where to reach out. So because you may have a friend who specializes in computer programming. So if you have a challenge at work, you need to be able to call that person and get some help. So I still do that. I have a very good friend of mine, a batchmate of mine, who is a sort of an expert in steam engineering stuff. So every time I have a challenge at my workplace, I just give him a call, and we have a discussion, and sort of I update myself on a little bit of knowledge, which, because I'm not an expert on that subject, right? So understand the basics. I find this a bit of a challenge with graduates these days. I don't know whether it's a semester system or not. Because I'm not saying one is better than the other, but we were sort of used to a full 3 years, 4 years of learning certain subjects. I'm not saying that the semester system is a bad system, but you need to put a little bit of effort to ensure you don't forget your basics, right? So the challenge is on to you, because I find many graduates at interviews who can't talk about some basic theoretical concepts, right? So that's not going to do good on you. So you need to brush up on that. The next one is on communication. I think one of the biggest challenges we have, especially when I do sessions like this, people don't even ask questions. There are 1 or 2 people who last, rest of them are okay to be quiet. It's not about verbal, it's about present. And presentation doesn't mean making some PowerPoint slide and presenting. It's about expressing your ideas in a clear and concise manner. You still have time in your life. You have had opportunities. I'm sure you would have made use of opportunities. If you have not, try to do something at least in the next couple of months to develop communication. And communication is not about language proficiency. It helps, right? If you're good in English, if you're good in, it'll help. But I mean, trust me, that's not the for a graduate engineer, that's not the main challenge people have, right? So even if I ask in Sinhala somebody to explain something, I find people struggle. So it's not a matter of language, it's a matter of confidence, it's a matter of articulation, expressing your ideas clearly, drawing something. I have a very, I don't know if it's a good habit or a bad habit. I sort of scribble on pieces of paper and boards when I want to express, but that helps me to get an idea across, right? So check whether you have these skills. Then in terms of analytical skills, most people misunderstand this word analytical skills. Analytical skills, I'm sure all of you being engineers, being in the math stream, you probably are good at your analytical skills, but understand what we mean by analytical skill. Analytical skill is not your ability to crunch data, right? Most people think that analytical skills is, okay, if you're given a large set of data, you can, draw graphs and put it into tables and, edit and subtract it and, be proficient with your Excel and Minitab or whatever statistical tool that you use. That's not analytical skills, right? Analytical skills is the opposite of it. It's actually your ability to step back from the data and then say, okay, this data is giving me this picture, right? That's something that we find a bit of a challenge because most of the time fresh graduates are usually drawn into the numbers. They sort of work on the calculation, but they don't look at what the calculation is telling you. So I don't know what you may have certain projects that you're doing in your course. Use those projects. For me, analytical skills is basically your interpretation of what's in front of you, right? So if you can't see that, if you can, all you can see is numbers, but you can add numbers, multiply, your multiplication, you can do it in your mind. That's not analytical skills, and that's in today's context with technology, that doesn't really add value. It would have added value a long time ago, but today it's not really adding. And say, okay, these numbers mean that we have a problem in this place. That's what analytical skills mean, right? So when somebody asks you to give an example of analytical skills, think of, get this stuff ready in your mind. Relations to your projects, your internships, you would have done some training programs, right? Your ability to see the picture, right? When you have a set of data in front of you, your ability to see the data in a bigger picture, right? Not the points in it, right? So there's a there's a phrase in English where you say you don't see the forest because of the trees, right? So we want the opposite to happen, because sometimes you see, all you see is the trees, you don't see that there's a forest there, right? We want analytical skills is you see a lot of trees and you understand that there's a forest there, right? So think of some examples where you were able to see a problem by looking at the data. So that's what analytical skills mean. Just a couple of more before we wind up, and I will have some conversation about questions. This point is very, very important. I'm sorry to be discussing this at your last year of the university, but as an engineer, it is very important that you learn to optimize resources and opportunity. And I ask students or people who come to interviews, what have they done in the university, in the 4 years of university. And if you're from Peradeniya and all you've done is your degree, I actually have a big question about your ability to utilize the resources of the university, right? You know what I mean, right? I mean, the university offers a lot more into you as an individual, for you to develop, whether it be sports, extracurricular activities, teamwork, other than your academic work. I know it's a little bit too late for us to have this conversation, but understand that it shows something that's probably you need to develop on. And okay, if you missed your chance at the university to utilize, then okay, think of something you can do after that at least, right? So especially if you are a residential student in a university like Peradeniya and you don't have anything other than your degree certificate after 4 years of being there, think of it in a different way. Think of it in terms of, have you really wasted some of the opportunities in terms of developing yourself as an individual, right? It's, I mean, not all of us are sporty, not all of us can do sports, but the university offers much more opportunities in terms of activities. So that's something that I would personally would like. This is something that I speak about for first years as well. So I hope you would have done something, at least within the faculty, at least, within your production engineer or manufacturing engineering society or whatever, get involved, organize something, do something, at least an event. If you have been part of, that's great. If not, it's just think of it as a wasting resources. And at least now, is there anything that you can do when you come out of university? Is there at least anything you can do with your time? People skills, very, very broad one. But it's very critical that you be able to build relationships. Now, these are not things that I can judge at an interview, right? We can't judge these skills, people skills, etc. at an interview, but we can judge this in your first 3 months in the organization, right? So very important to keep in mind, because like I said, these are your survival skills, right? Those are, your entry, you got your qualification, you're confident, your communication skills, you show some demonstration of your analytical skills, you pass your entry level, you get the job. Now it's about survival, right? Don't think that just because you got a job, you're going to last there for ever. Some companies are very tough during probation periods. I think it's good to be tough, because there's no point in having you on board for a couple of years and then telling you are not doing well. So building relationships, working together, commitment, trust. One specific example I'd like to tell you guys is that something that I observe, especially from fresh graduates, is that when you're an intern or you're doing your first year, third year or training that you do, when you go to a factory or a big company, you feel that you need to be together with your colleagues, peers. So you see all the trainees, interns, sitting together at the lunch table. That's fine. I mean, end of the day, you feel comfortable with your peers. But when you join our organization, you need to have a level of maturity that you are now part of a large team. There's no hierarchies in terms of relationships. There could be hierarchies in terms of the way work happens. But if you keep on behaving like an intern in terms of the relationships you build, in terms of working together, talking to people, and you're just sort of limiting yourself to a particular group of people, then it actually shows bad on what you growing forward. Have your friends, not a problem. I don't have any concerns with it. Have your friends, have your personal interactions, not a problem. But I do see this as a very big challenge with young people joining the industry that they sort of stick to a very small circle. That's something personal. That's up to you. But they don't expand on their network and their relationship, which is very critical in your first 6 months to 1 year in a company, right? Because that's your learning curve. You have a lot to learn about the company, about the industry. That's not in the books and the manuals, right? A lot of things that I've learned, it's over a cup of tea at lunch, talking to somebody, they'll share some experience, they'll share their side of the story. That's how you learn, right? I mean, not everything comes in a manual. So that's a little bit of a advice for everybody. Then in terms of leadership skills, I think it's something that's spoken of many times. This is again something we will check at an interview. So be ready to talk about it, right? So just what I'm trying to say is, now you may not have an opportunity to do something new now, but just think about something in terms of something you've done and be ready for an interview. But it is about saying that, like I said, the market is very competitive. And these are the opportunities, the skills and competencies that we will now look at in a much more strict manner when we want to recruit, right? So, your ability to take initiative, have a vision, because like I said, it's all of you have the same qualification, right? So what differentiates yourself from the rest of them is what matters. So I think I've come to the end of my points. I think we can go on till a little bit more. I'd like to do that in terms of a conversation, a discussion on any specific points that you would want to discuss. Still fine for a discussion on that. So over to you guys for any questions or discussions. Any day.
Dr. Prasanna, probably you can moderate the session if there are questions. So thank you very much, Suneth, for taking time to explain everything for our final students. I hope that there may be a couple of questions more, because already you have given some opportunity for them to ask, but anyway, there will be some. So Dr. Prasanna will moderate if there are any questions come from students. Prasanna.
You all need to have questions now, right? I mean, you're just 2 months away from graduating, and if you don't, I would be worried.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, can go ahead.
So I have a question about so when we go to the entry level, interview as a graduate, in the this situation, in the country and world. So what are the changes we have to know about? Out of the frame, we can't face as a traditional engineering graduates. Rather than what are the changes we want to know about new?
Your name, please. Sorry for.
I am Pramod.
Pramod, it's like this. I don't think at an entry level we would expect anything different in terms of the change in times, right? Like I said, the market has changed, and therefore the demand and the industry has changed. But we are not going to do, the only thing what I meant there is to say that it has become very competitive, right? It will be very competitive because the job opportunities might be a little bit less, right? So first thing is, it's not that we will expect you all to be different from let's say 2 years ago, from what I would expect from a engineering graduate 2 years ago to what I expect now. I wouldn't say there's anything big, there's a big difference. But in terms of what you think about or be ready in terms of how these challenges has impacted you in terms of your life and what you have done, and some things like that for you to prepare. But my personal belief is that at an entry level job, Pramod, I wouldn't expect too much of a difference from in terms of from a interview candidate. What I said, those basics still hold. That has to be there. All I meant is that it's going to be much more competitive now than it was earlier. That's something you all need to understand.
Thank you.
Good question. Any others?
Suneth, I have a question regarding interviews.
Yeah.
Again, yeah. So it's a specific question that I've. That is like a question that has really confused me on how I should approach it. Now, when someone, it's a very generic question as to what would you want to do in 5 or 10 years. Where would you want to see yourself at? And obviously, I'd want to definitely grow as a person, like with experience and maybe lead initiatives or lead teams, and ultimately climb up the corporate ladder. And if that's the way I want to go, and be a director or CEO, that would be my ideal future. But sometimes you just say that you want to be a director or CEO, that might come out in a very it depends on the person, definitely, but it might not give a really good outlook on you. So how would you handle that question? Like, should we be really honest, or should we be careful how we answer it?
For me, that's a very traditional question that people used to ask. I'm sure they still ask that question, and we would probably also ask it in a different manner. See, the objective of that question is like this: we need to understand whether you are ambitious enough, whether you have thought about your future. Second is whether that ambition is realistic in terms of who you are, right? Because you can't be in the two extremes of one person saying, I don't have any ambition, I've never thought about what I want to do. That's one thing. The other one is you might sound a little bit too ambitious compared to what you have to offer, right? So it's a matter of striking that deal. My only advice, this is something very personal to me, so I don't know whether you want to take it or not in that way. I don't believe that don't think about the corporate the management levels as your as your goals, right? So some people say I want to be a CEO by the age of 30, 35. So then I ask, okay, what are you going to do for the next 30 years of your life, right? Because I mean, you can't be doing the same. You can't be a CEO job for the rest of your life also, right? So don't think of your success in terms of pillars. My suggestion to that question, my answer is one is like you said, yes. We look for people who want to move. One, we are looking at the direction you want to move, Rajiv, right? So there are people who would want to move more from a technical perspective, or people who want to move into more general management perspective. Don't make that decision right now because it's too early for you to make that decision. But you'll have some kind of a feel for what you want to do, right? So you can say that you want to sort of get into more responsibilities in these kind of areas and try to keep it broad, right? So don't be very specific saying you want to be so and so. You want to say, let's say you want to gain experience in manufacturing or engineering, supply chain, and then grow in the organizations in terms of hierarchy, but also try to build that your peripherals, right? So in terms of people management, in terms of budgeting, show that you are willing to grow while you learn. So what happens most of the time is people just answer and say, I want to be somebody senior, I want to be somebody somebody up there, but it doesn't really give us a sense of whether that person actually understands what it needs to go there, right? So I think, like you said, it depends specifically on the person who asked the question, but I would say yes. Don't. I'm not a big fan of anybody saying they want to be a CEO, not because of anything else. I think they've not really thought it through, because what do you do after that? If you want to say you want to be an entrepreneur, then I'm fine. Because if you say you want to be a CEO in 10 years time, then okay, what do you do after that? People are very unprepared for that question. But you don't need to say you want to be a director or a CEO. That the designation doesn't really matter in that question. It is about saying, are you 5 years is good enough for you to step into some level of a senior management position. So you want to step into the senior management position, but importantly, you have to bring in what you will pick up over those 5 years in terms of your skills. So you need to answer the question not in terms of where you will end up with, but also with what you will end up with, right? So in terms of your capabilities, and say you want to gain experience in these areas. I hope, Rajiv, that's an answer you can work with.
Yes, definitely. Just a follow-up question on something you said. You also said that you'd be fine with someone saying that he or she would want to be an entrepreneur.
Yep.
Did you really mean it? Because sometimes, like most organizations, invest a lot on their workforce, and if that he or she leaves the job to become an entrepreneur, that would be
I'm talking 10 years plus, Rajiv. So I'm not talking for anybody. I mean, don't go and tell an interview that you want to be an entrepreneur in 2 to 3 years, right? I mean, that's not going to work. But I'm saying is, I mean, I still believe that I want to work for the next 10 years and maybe do something on my own. I mean, I still have time, right? So don't say it for the sake of saying it. And if you don't have any entrepreneurial ambitions, don't put it there, right? I mean, it's not to sound great, but if you have done something, balance it out, Rajiv, so in that, to say that, you want to work, get professional experience, maybe 10-15 years. I mean, keep it broad, right? I mean, don't say, I mean, if you say you want to, in 5 years time get into something on your own, obviously the company, because end of the day, it's a investment that they're making, like you said, right? I mean, it's not fair for the company also to put all that resources on your development and then you leave. It's not fair. But I think a 10-year horizon is more than enough for you to sort of balance out that return on investment that the company puts into you, because by that time, you and the company would have come to some kind of a agreement on how it's going to go. Right? Don't throw in that entrepreneurship unless you're really sure about it. Because some people throw it just as a fancy thinking that it will impress people, but it probably can show that you don't have any idea what you're talking about.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Rajiv. Any other questions? Good questions. I hope we have some time for a few more.
May I go, sir?
Yes.
In the current job market, sir, waiting for a perfect job in terms of, let's say, job role, industry, and salary, getting into a job where you can get more learning and more experience. I mean, is that worthwhile in the current market?
Rule number 1, get a job. Okay, first, before I say that, rule number 1, decide whether you are getting into industry and work or whether you want to follow academic, right? Dr. Asela might not be happy that everybody goes into. There has to be somebody who has to come back to the faculty also, right? Let's keep that in mind. I'm sure you would have decided by now, right? Don't make that optional and you're not sure job stories don't work, right? I mean, that just shows that you're not ready. Okay.
Even Suneth, now we as a department, we do not want that kind of people. So we will even call for applications and see what their plans are, and accordingly we'll take them for 6 months, 1 year situation.
Agreed.
Not
but
for like just pass by people.
You know what I mean, right? I mean, there are people who take that as the backup option, right?
No. From last year we didn't do that one. So
that's because that used to be something that was there some time ago. So I'm just telling, don't do that. If you want academic, I know some people. I mean, there was somebody who joined my team at Fonterra, and she had her mind made up, but I think she was waiting for some call to come, and she joined that place. And so there are people who follow academic opportunities, and there are people who also follow academic opportunities after a couple of years in the industry also. So that's also an option, right? So that's not. So first choice is have a feel on which route you want to go to. Second is, if you decide to get into industry, get into some kind of a job on the very next day you leave the university. That's my personal advice. Because from there on, it all that your meter starts counting in terms of your experience, right? There's no job that is a bad job. Get into something, but don't get into something where you are physically and mentally stressed out, right? Because you will sort of suffer a lot. Salaries and everything is very relative. Chiran, right, who asked me the question, it's very relative based on your personal financial challenges, etc. So I can't give you a direct answer, but if you can manage to live a fairly basic life, I would say give salary as a, you need to have a minimum salary. I mean, you can't go to work and not get paid, right? I mean, I don't believe in that. But if you can, your first couple of years, if you can rely that on experience, exposure, and getting yourself into a organization that can give you that breadth of experience, right? Say for example, if you can get into manufacturing kind of an organization, yes, that helps, because even if you are in a non-manufacturing role, you have experience to walk around and see what's happening. But importantly, don't wait for the perfect job. There's nothing called a perfect job. Let me be very clear about, there's nothing called a perfect job, because that's a very relative term based on your current understanding of what it is, right? So and like I said, as you grow in your self mature, what was good for you 10 years ago will not be good for you now. But have certain things that you are very clear on in terms of that you are not uncomfortable with, right? Because there are certain people who can't work in certain industries due to personal, religious, or social beliefs or whatever. Be careful with those things, because it's okay. I mean, those are your personal beliefs, right? So there's nothing wrong with those industries, right? I mean, people work in this. I'm just trying to say, from a social context, you may, or a religious context, you may not want to work in a particular industry. That's fine. So because you don't stress yourself out just for the sake of it. But important thing for me is try and get yourself employed somewhere. It doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, I mean, you can always 6 months and you find another job, you go. I don't think it's a big deal. It's don't worry about that, right? But that second job you go to, ensure that's a place that sort of ticks most of the boxes, right? Because if you get that in your first go, good, congratulations, good stuff. But if you don't, my suggestion is go work somewhere. It's going to be a bit hard, it's going to be a bit rough. Get your foot in somewhere, and then while you work, get an understanding of what's around you, and then get into that job that you think is perfect or whatever. But understand that's a very relative claim, because what's perfect at an entry level will not be perfect at a senior level. And then you need to keep moving. I have nothing against people working in the same job for a long time. My at Unilever, I was there almost 12 years. My colleagues who joined with me are there now for 17 years. Not a problem. I don't see any problem with it. But also, if you see an opportunity somewhere that you think you can contribute more, you can move, right? So advice is, please ensure that you get yourself employed the very next day that you leave the university, right? If you don't have anything, at least get yourself employed in terms of, at least on a what I call a voluntary basis, doing something in the industry, or training, or getting an internship, even if it doesn't pay you, because you have no choice, right? I suggest that's the best thing to do, because don't waste your time waiting for that perfect job, trying to do just everything, and then, because you'll risk a lot of things. Because the meter starts the day you graduate, and people will look for that experience. That experience matters. That 6 months of working somewhere matters a lot. I hope I answered that question, Chiran.
Thank you, sir.
Right?
Yes,
That's my personal advice for that.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Good questions. Any other?
So do we have more questions from Swathan?
I have one last question.
Yes, Mohammed, please go ahead.
Sir, I have the question is as a production engineer, we have we don't have a unique job as a civil engineer or electrical whatever. So we is how do we find our job? I mean, as a production engineer or automation engineer or supply chain or whatever, how do we define our job as a graduate?
Okay, I think first of all, good question. I think this is something that the faculty will also need to help students to understand. You can look at it these two ways. One is you can say you don't have a unique job, or you can say you can do anything, right? So you can have either approach, right? Because if you take the production engineering scope of things, you learn the basics of a lot of the things, right? You may not go into expertise levels of mechanical engineering, but I'm sure you learn your basics of mechanical engineering and process engineering to some extent, at least in some of the courses. So that's the first one. In terms of your attitude of, do you look at it as saying, I don't have a unique proposition, I'm not a specialist, versus saying, look, I mean, I know this, I know that, I understand that. I may not be an expert, but I understand that. So based on whatever opportunity you give me, I will be able to take it on. So that's the first thing you need to promote. You need to, not everybody, right, understand how you pitch your understanding, right? So you may not be an expert, and we don't, I mean, just because somebody did mechanical engineering or chemical engineering doesn't make them an expert also, because they're just coming out of university, right? So there's no big gap in knowledge that I would see from an industry perspective, right? So if I'm taking a maintenance engineer, somebody with a mechanical engineering degree versus a production engineering degree, I actually don't see too much of a knowledge gap at that entry level, right? It's all about how you grow from there. Even let's say, I mean, process engineers, right? um, I worked with a lot of fresh graduates who does chemical and process engineering, but same jobs I've seen people in mechanical engineering also doing. So it's not so complicated that you need that expertise out there at an entry level job, right? So I think first is let's get your mind straight that it's not that complicated. You can play that role. Second is, I think more and more as the industries are evolving, these specializations are sort of merging into different roles. The traditional roles are slowly disappearing, and there's a big focus on more of a management concept that's coming in. Because at the end of the day, everything is about resources and managing resources. So if you can sort of pitch yourself either as an auto, so I don't really recommend going down a route of calling yourself an automation engineer or a mechanical engineer or whatever at the time of graduating, right? I mean, those are very specialized skills that you probably need to decide later on whether you want to, if that's your passion is automation, that's fine, but don't define yourself right now into a very narrow scope. That's a very difficult thing to get out of, right? As you grow, like we said, as you grow your brand, if you think that's a passion you have to, yeah, then you get into jobs that offer you that experience and take it on. But you need to pitch yourself as somebody who knows your basics, right? So like I said, if you are getting into manufacturing, please understand that there are some very fundamental basic processes that's there in a manufacturing organization. Do a research about the industry that you're getting into. I mean, today you got the internet, right? I mean, that's got anything. You can study about the manufacturing processes, study about the other processes. If you're getting into let's say an ice cream factory or a rubber factory or whatever, there are, I mean, you need to understand the process, because you don't know those processes. Specific processes are not taught in the university, right? You're just taught a framework. And face the interview saying that you're a production engineering graduate who can sort of fit into any of these roles. So I would sort of turn it around and say, rather than saying you don't fit anywhere, I say you'll fit anywhere in terms of opportunity. Right, so that's my view, but that doesn't come just okay. That comes with a lot of effort, research, and finding yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from? Yep, please.
I have questions.
Yes.
Sir, you mentioned about management.
Yeah.
So while I was in the university, I focused more on being technical, and then when I went to my trainings, I realized that it's not all about technical. You need management as well. So what is your recommendation on balancing these technical skills and management skills? It's
okay, this is a 3-hour discussion that we need to have separately, but I'll just try to summarize this. I think this is something, if we can organize another discussion, this is a very, very common question that comes across most graduates, especially in career counseling, etc. Management is not a, it's not a qualification or a degree or a skill, right? It is how we live our life. It is how we do our job. People think that management and engineering are mutually exclusive, right? And this question comes up a lot. Some people say, I want to go to the management side. Some people say, I want to go to the technical side. I don't think there's a clear distinction like that. There are, of course, certain technical expertise you need to develop in terms of design and stuff like that, which are very unique jobs that are there, right? But even them, you have to, how far are you going to be like a draftsman, designer kind of a person for the rest of the life, or are you going to sort of grow up on that and do your own business or do something, right? So management is not a a mutually exclusive part. It's a competency that you need to have, right, in whatever job you do. In whatever job you do, in whatever part of, even if you don't do a job, if you're at home, you're an entrepreneur, that's a competency, right? So management is a competency. Now the only thing is, when you go into the industry, you see this distinction between, okay, you're a manager, you're an engineer, kind of a thing, which unfortunately is still there. So my suggestion is, don't worry about it. Be open to learn. Management is not about qualifications or doing anything. That's up to you. You can do an MBA, you can do a MSc in automation, not a problem. That's all up to you. But for me, management is a competency. Management is about your ability to manage resources, which is basically money and people and time. And there are some tools, techniques, and concepts that you need to learn. And as long as you figure out your way around that, I don't think you can be an engineer if you can't control your money and your people and your time. I mean, that's basic stuff, right? So don't think of this is for everybody, because I get this question a lot. Do I take management approach or do I take a technical approach? My suggestion is, don't think them as mutually exclusive. Think of management as a competency. And sometimes what happens is, people completely move out of engineering and they go and do some, let's say you want to get into a sort of a supply chain, which is a little bit further away from what you would call a technical engineering role, but your concepts of engineering doesn't really disappear, right? And you don't know where you would come back to needing those skills. So I would suggest everybody to start developing their management competencies. Don't shy away from it. Don't think it's something that's bad. I know this is a big challenge for the department also, because sometimes the manufacturing engineering department, people sort of put it down also, saying it's more of a management kind of a thing. I don't think that's the right thing to do. It's a competency that everybody needs, right? And if you don't have it, then you don't succeed. So if you have not thought about it, that's fine. I mean, I don't think we expect you to think about it right now, but be open to it as a concept, right? That when you're in a team, maybe at a junior level, you just go and execute something, but as you step on to your career as an engineer, let's say you join as a maintenance engineer, junior maintenance engineer, and then you sort of progress onto a maintenance engineer. The first thing is about your budgets, right? So you need to know where your capital budgets are, what your operational budgets are. And if you don't know that, then you have a problem, right? Then you need to know how to manage your inventory of spare parts, manage your people, the grievances of people, how you motivate them. So that's management, right? So you can't be an engineer without having that. So don't worry if you have not focused on it. But my suggestion is be open to understand what it is. We'll probably have a different, we can have a different conversation around it. But be ready to acknowledge it and don't run away from it, right? So that's my answer.
Understood, sir. Thank you very much.
All right, I think we are done on time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if students do not have any other questions, any other burning questions to Mr. Kotuthenne? Okay, Mr. Kotuthenne, it seems we are done with it, but if you don't mind, if I can ask just a very short question. Like you showed these 3 phases, the entry, survival, and being competitive. So, like if I asked you for like a piece of advice for our students from the level of entry, how do you really maintain a level of confidence that you can be competitive one day?
I think it's about, it comes from a your ambition to grow, right? So I think that's the first thing you need to have, because like I think somebody asked about the question about what the company thinks when they ask you where you see yourself, right? Some people, they don't develop their competencies, right? So I work with people who have 20 years of experience, but for me they are still at a entry level, especially for the management competencies that I spoke about, right? So they're engineers, they're good, they're experienced, but they can't grow in the organization because they have not developed their competencies. So I think it is about understanding the different expectations at the different levels of when you grow in an organization. We can teach a little bit of that, but I think it's all about experience, coaching, mentoring, speaking to people, looking around you and understanding what those competencies are, right? Because you will clearly see them. I mean, when you go to an organization, you will clearly see the best performing employees and you will see the worst performing employees. It's 2 weeks in the organization, you can see it. It's that visible, right? It's not a big big black box of you can't figure out what's happening. The people who are performing well, people who have the good relationships, who are known, who are recognized, that's well known in any organization, and whatever level, either you're a junior engineer or a senior manager, there's a very good understanding in the organization of who is doing well and who is not doing well. So you need to figure out what are those competencies that you lack, right? Because right now, you, like somebody said, okay, they may not have thought about management as a competency, so what do I do? So that's fine. So you, at least you realize that you lack that, and then you start developing that to showcase that you have it, right? I'll give another example, right? So sometimes people, I find it very, very irritating at times. People join us in manufacturing industries, and they don't really want to get involved with the production facility. I mean, that's a crime. I mean, that's not even survival, right? So you have to understand what the company values, and then figure out whether you are good at it. You can get feedback from your supervisors, from your managers. Have somebody in the company you can trust at a slightly senior level that you can go to and get some feedback. Little bit risky if you don't trust that person, but you need to have some level of trust. And then gradually ensure that you go from entry level through sustain to competitiveness. Because what happens most of the time is people think that they are doing their best, everything, and then they don't get promoted and they get frustrated and they say, why am I not being promoted? Because I'm such a good person. But being a good person at your current job is not the requirement for you to get promoted, right? I mean, you may be the best person in your job. That doesn't really mean that you will be the best person at the next level, right? So that's something people find it very difficult to understand. They think, okay, if I perform my job very well, I will get an opportunity to progress. That doesn't happen, because we sometimes have experience where we promote a very good shop floor worker as a supervisor, and it becomes a disaster because supervising skills is very different from production skills, right? So we've had that experience where, somebody who's hit his targets, everything, and, just for motivation's sake, we make him a supervisor, and then the whole thing crashes because that's not a competency that he has developed, right? So be careful in terms of what are those competencies that you need to develop. And I think those managerial competencies in terms of managing the resources around you are the primary things that you need to focus on. Secondly, if there are any specific technology related stuff related to that industry you're in, please invest your time and energy in terms of learning those things, right? Because you don't know everything, all the technologies, because each industry will be very different, right? So I worked for 12 years at Unilever in different in instant tea, then was in detergents, and then when I went to Fonterra into dairy, the technology was very different, right? I had to learn about microbiology, so I got myself a book. I read articles on the internet, right? Because as a head of factory in a dairy company, if I don't know my basics of microbiology, which I have not learned anywhere, I really can't have a conversation with most of my team. So then that's something you need to figure out. Okay, you need to learn that, you need to have that knowledge, and then you need to have energy to invest and learn that, right? So otherwise it's not going to, nobody is going to train you on these things, right? Companies will train you on some basic things, but you need to learn as you go along. So I think to answer that question, to summarize it, saying that understand what's important for the company, what are those technical and managerial skills that you see that are important for the company, whether it is cost, whether it is people, whether it's technology, whether it's quality, safety, and then start building those qualifications, building those talents by yourself, right? Because it's not about somebody teaching you. If you join a company and you join the food industry, right? So then you need to show the company that you understand quality, right? So you need to read up about it, you need to learn about it, talk to the people, talk to QA department, understand what they do, look at how your engineering impacts quality, right? And then the company will start recognizing you, saying, okay, this guy is not only just a technical person, he understands the process. Look at cost, look at people, look at safety, so things like that, right? So that's how you figure out which competencies to develop, because you can't develop all the competencies. I mean, that's you can't do that. So develop whatever is important for you to move to the next level. I hope that's a answer that you can work with.
Thank you very much. Exactly. So I think it was a very fruitful session for our students who are just to step into the industry. So I think since we are behind the clock, I think we can conclude the session for today. So before that, I would invite Dr. Asela to give the token of appreciation. We have certain formal mechanism. Dr. Asela, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Prasanna. So on behalf of Department of Manufacturing and Industrial Engineering, I would like to especially thank Mr. Suneth Kotuthenne. So as a token of appreciation, we would like to share the digital certificate for you for your speech. Thank you very much, Suneth. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Asela.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you all, and all the best. Good luck, guys. Please do reach out to me if you need anything. The department's got my contact details. I would have loved to come to the department, which I usually do once in 3 months at least, but unfortunately, with the current situation, that's not possible. Please do reach out to me even once you graduate. Once you go out, you can find me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. I think some of you have already done so. I think great initiative. Those are things what I call initiative, where you start building your network now itself. Do it. Build those relationships, and good luck, everybody. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Kotuthenne, yes. Give us a second. Smriti is waiting to offer the vote of thanks.
All right. Okay. Sorry.
Yes.
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you very much, sir. It was a very successful and an interesting interactive session. So on behalf of the Department of Manufacturing and Industrial Engineering, I would like to express my gratitude for taking your valuable time to share your knowledge and opinion today. It was a very much needed session for many students as they were confused about how to handle and face their job markets in this COVID era. So I myself learned a lot through this session. So I'm sure you motivated the students and gave very helpful tips to face the job in this current situation more confidently. And thank you very much, sir, once again. I also would like to extend my gratitude for the organizing team for arranging this successful webinar. And thank you all the participants for joining today. Thank you very much.
With that, we will conclude the session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.